Welcome to the Dan Sports Tips Daily Fantasy NFL show for week 13 of the NFL season. I will be taking a look at everything you need for your daily fantasy sports games on DraftKings this week. I will be looking at offensive stacks, defensive stacks, players that can be used at other positions as well. For anyone that hasn't had the opportunity to sign up and play daily fantasy sports with DraftKings yet, I will pop a link beneath the video in the description below that will enable you to do that today. I will dive straight in with offensive stacks, and I'm going to start with the game that everybody's going to be looking at this week, which is New Orleans and Detroit. With the New Orleans Saints, we can stack quarterback Drew Brees for 7,600 and wide receiver Brandin Cooks for 6,400. Looks like a perfect storm for stacking this game, with the Saints playing at home in the Dome, where they routinely score 30 plus points against the Detroit Lions passing defense that ranks 32nd against the pass in DVOA. Brees is going to give us points here, having put up an average of over 30 points at home in games that are not against Denver and Seattle, who are obviously two of the best pass defenses around. Brandin Cooks was shut out without a catch or a target last week against the Rams. He has made his displeasure with his role in this offense known. We know that Cooks is a big play threat. He's had some long touchdown catches this year, and I suspect that due to last week he will possibly be lower owned, and I do think the Saints may look to get him back involved in their game. He was obviously expected to be the top receiver coming into this season. It is a soft matchup. I'm sure he'll be involved early and often. Last week's game without a target is a serious outlier for a receiver who'd seen a minimum of 5 targets and more often close to double digits in games and entered last week as the leading receiver on the team in targets prior to that game. An alternative stack for the Saints is quarterback Drew Brees 7,600 with wide receiver Willie Snead for 5,100. Snead is also a very intriguing stack option with the aforementioned Brees, as the well-documented weakness of the Saints defense is over the middle and slot receivers. That's where Snead resides for a large percentage of his routes. I would expect Thomas to be the highest owned of the Saints receivers, but with Darius Slay in attendance in the Lions secondary, I think Thomas is an avoid this week. I wouldn't put you off stacking either Snead or Brandin Cooks. Sneaky stack of the week, the Chicago Bears. Yeah, I said the Chicago Bears. Quarterback Matt Barkley for $5,000, wide receiver Marquess Wilson for $4,000 is about as bargain basement as a stack gets. I'm probably only going to use it in 1 or 2 lineups myself, but it does merit consideration. Barkley did throw for 300 yards last week against the Titans pass defense that does rank very similar to the San Francisco 49ers. Let's make no mistake here. The national narrative that the Bears lost the football game last week because Barkley's receivers were unable to catch a football game is fundamentally incorrect. Barkley's 2 red zone interceptions were the reason that Chicago lost that game. Despite that though, Barkley led the Bears offense to their second highest points total of the season, and the team did move the football to get into those red zone positions despite the lack of weapons available. Wilson emerged as the favourite target for Barkley in the second game of the year. Now obviously that is a small sample size. Wilson's only played the 2 games, Barkley's only started the 1, but he started the season hurt. He caught 8 of 11 targets last week for 125 yards and a score. Chicago should be able to score against the 49ers. With defensive injuries that Chicago have, the game could almost be an under-the-radar shootout this week. So I'm certain that this stack will be low-owned as well. There's definitely scope for it to provide you with production in terms of points, as well as the ability to load up on the rest of your roster with the higher-priced skill position players around. And the Atlanta Falcons, quarterback Matt Ryan for 6,800 and wide receiver Julio Jones for 8,700. Now, obviously, that's a little bit more of a premium stack than the Chicago Bears version, but Matt Ryan has been genuinely superb this year, leading the Falcons to the number 3 ranking in passing offense by DVOA. Julio Jones is clearly the best receiver in the offense, among the best in the NFL, and he faces a nice matchup this week. The Chiefs cornerbacks do not shadow receivers and play to their side like the Seattle Seahawks. Julio Jones, like the Seattle Seahawks do in their defense as well. Jones will likely see over half of his routes against the far weaker Phillip Gaines compared to Marcus Peters, who's clearly the best player at corner for the Chiefs. With Desmond Trufant out as well, the Falcons defense takes a hit. The pass rush is down as well. This game could also develop into something more of a shootout, which is going to favour the Falcons at home in the Dome, where they're generally a lot better and put up a lot of points as well. Defensive stacks this week, I'm going to go with the Denver Broncos running back Kapri Bibbs for $4,000 and the Denver Broncos defense for $3,900. Denver has stated a desire to get Bibbs more involved in their offense, as Devontae Booker has been pretty underwhelming since coming into the lineup for injured CJ Anderson. Bibbs saw his highest carries of the season last week with 9. It can be assumed if he hadn't had to leave that game for concussion check that he may have amassed more. And the strength of Jacksonville is their pass defence, with quarterback Trevor Siemian out of this game and rookie Paxton Lynch in at quarterback for the Broncos as well. He hasn't looked ready for in limited action this season for the Broncos, so they could look to lean more on the running game in this game. They boast an excellent pass defence themselves. They face the erratic Blake Bortles, and with Chris Ivory out for Jacksonville, it does leave only the plodding TJ Yeldon to try and take advantage of the below average element of this Denver defence, which is the running defence. I think they can keep the Jags on a fairly low number, and I think Bibbs has got upside at running back, when probably Booker will be highly owned as well. Looking at quarterbacks that we can be getting involved with this week, Colin Kaepernick of the San Francisco 49ers for 6,100. He fell just short of the 300-yard passing number by only 4 yards against the Miami Dolphins last week, but he did rush for over 100 yards. He's running the ball better than a number of running backs since he took over the starting role, and while there's been no clear receiver stacking within San Francisco, maybe tight end Vance McDonald at a push. They do face a horrifically short Chicago Bears defensive unit this week and should be able to move the football. The 20 points barrier that Kaepernick has hit in 3 of his last 4 games seems a reasonable floor for expectations for his production this week. And Tyrod Taylor of the Buffalo Bills for 5,700. Tyrod is likely going to have to sling the ball around to keep pace with an Oakland offense in this game. He's going to have his best receiver Sammy Watkins on the field for this game, according to reports as well, against an Oakland defense that has been ineffective at best, playing at a far lower level than has been expected prior to this season. Taylor offers excellent upside. He runs the football well as well, and he has a relatively high floor in this matchup as well. I think Taylor's well worth a look as well. Looking at running backs this week, there are some premium options that look set to have a big day, starting with David Johnson of the Arizona Cardinals for 9,500. Should be the first name into your lineups this week. Washington cannot stop the run. They face the most complete back in the NFL this week in David Johnson. Johnson didn't move the ball well on the ground last week against a poor Falcons unit, but as usual, made up for it by gaining over 100 receiving yards with a touchdown through the air. Johnson has contributed at least 27 points in 6 of his last 7 games, and with Carson Palmer struggling at quarterback, looks set to be another big day as a centrepiece of this Cardinals offense against the Washington Redskins. Lesean McCoy of the Buffalo Bills for 7,800. McCoy obviously features on what is now the second-ranked rushing offense behind the Cowboys in DVOA. He had a solid day last week before leaving with an injury. That is the risk you take with McCoy. When you play him, we know he's banged up. He does seem to pick up those niggling injuries and leave games early on occasions. However, against an Oakland defense that does struggle with the run, ranking just 27th as a unit in DVOA against the run, the Bills can expect another week of production from the running back position. McCoy's value will increase further if Mike Gillislee misses more time with his hamstring injury that saw him inactive last week. Jordan Howard of the Chicago Bears for 6,900. He draws the plum matchup with the San Francisco 49ers this week. That could, in what's got potential to be an absolute dog of a game. With that being said, there are players we can use. Howard is one of them. He is the most consistent weapon on the Chicago Bears, and against the 49ers rush defense that DVOA ranks as 30th and has allowed hideous amounts of rushing yards despite holding the likes of Jay Ajayi and David Johnson under 100 yards in the last 3 weeks. There is a lot of upside for Howard. The Bears have got little left on the field in the way of passing options, with Matt Barkley at quarterback, Alshon Jeffrey, Kevin White, Zach Miller all unavailable for the game. Jordan Howard has a very good yards per carry as well. I think Howard's an excellent option for you this week. And Jeremy Hill of the Cincinnati Bengals for 4,300. The Philadelphia Eagles run defense is certainly not on the same level as their passing unit, ranks only slightly above average in DVOA. Hill is the lead horse in the backfield for this Bengals unit now, set career highs last week for carries and targets. His price does not reflect the expected workload in this game after the injury to Giovanni Bernard a couple of weeks ago, and he can be plugged into lineups with reasonable performance expectations this week as well. Looking at wide receivers, I've got a few options. Golden Tate of Detroit for 6,200. I'm not going to stack Tate with Stafford, as I don't think Stafford offers upside as a stack quarterback. He's only got 2 300-yard passing games this year. All that being said, it is a good matchup against a soft pass defense. Tate has emerged after the early season Marvin Jones explosion as the number 1 receiver in the Lions passing game, which was the consensus pre-season. There is no doubt that the Lions, who aren't exactly effective running the football but will need to score in this game to keep up with the Saints, are going to have to throw it around, and Tate looks a solid play at receiver. If you do want to use a Lions running back, obviously it's going to be Theo Riddick, I think, but didn't quite want to put him up this week. Wide receiver Jordan Matthews of the Philadelphia Eagles for 5,700, lining up in the slot for the Eagles, should give Matthews, the most consistent receiver on the Eagles, a reasonable matchup with cornerback Barkley Snead of the Bengals. The overall unit ranks middle of the pack in terms of passing defense in DVOA at 15th. Volume as usual is the key, and assuming that Matthews has recovered from the injury he picked up on Monday Night Football, then as the leader in targets for the Eagles, he does offer a relatively high floor, assuming that the shoulder and ankle are better. And Malcolm Mitchell of the New England Patriots for 3,600. Mitchell has emerged with greater opportunity since he got some playing time when Chris Hogan was hurt. There are targets available in New England with the injury to Rob Gronkowski with his season over. Mitchell did score twice last week to add to his score the week before, taking him to 3 in 2 games while seeing a season high 7 targets. If we are to assume that this is an indicator of increased trust from Tom Brady, then a Rams pass defense that was torched by the Saints last week could be in a world of hurt against another proficient passing offense that ranks number 1 in DVOA and its new emerging star in Malcolm Mitchell. Tight ends this week, the premium option with a number of players, Jordan Reed, Rob Gronkowski out, is Greg Olsen of Carolina for 5,100. This is a game where Kelvin Benjamin looks to be a player to avoid lining up opposite Richard Sherman, potentially a shootout on the West Coast. Olsen looks a very solid play against the Seahawks unit that has struggled against the tight end. He's at worst Cam Newton's second favourite target in the offence. I think the Panthers will be throwing a lot to keep up with or catch up with Seattle in this game, and Olsen looks set for certainly one of his bigger days of the season. And if you like a cheaper lottery ticket tight end, Josh Hill of the New Orleans Saints for 2,500. He's our lottery ticket, as I say. He had more targets last week, catching them all, and more yards than Kobe Fleener, who will be the most used tight end in New Orleans in games this week. In a game that projects to have somewhere close to 1 million points in it as well, I think he's got superb upside. And obviously, I'm hoping that the ratio in terms of targets and yardage will continue. And that gives us Hill at 2,500, bottom dollar, really cheap price. Looking at defence and special teams this week, I'll take the Green Bay Packers for 2,900. The Packers are an excellent run defence, which is likely to force poor old Brock Osweiler to have to throw the football to target the weak part of this unit, which is the secondary of Green Bay. Unfortunately, he's shown a complete inability to connect with his receivers, including the likes of DeAndre Hopkins, who's one of the best around. He just can't get the ball there. It's hard to see Houston piling on the points in Lambeau Field, and the Packers, now that Clay Matthews is back, are always able to get to the quarterback and maybe notch just some sack points as well. Those are the plays that I've got for you this week. Best of luck with your lineups. Please do like the video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Give me a follow on Twitter at dansports.tips, and please do tweet me any lineups that you have success with that you've used any of these players. Let me know who you'll be using in your lineups. Anyone you think I've missed out on that I should have been highlighting on the show. I'm here every week through the season. I'll see you next week.